Hello, welcome to the sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Modern Open in Cincinnati, part of the SCG Tour brought to you by Ultimate Guard. I'm Nick Miller alongside a Grand Prix champion, Team Open champion here on the SCG Tour, Clay Spicklemire. How you doing?
Good to see you.
Now, you've been championing this 5-color Death Shadow deck for a while.
Yes.
And the Death Shadow deck, originated with the Jund build, then kind of went through some iterations to Abzan and to Grixis. You've just mashed them all together and have had great success with the deck, and you and Chris Anderson, a couple other people have been working on this deck for a while, right?
Yeah. So my voyage with Death Shadow started back when Probe was legal, and I played the Gitaxian Probe, Become Immense Battle Rage, Step Links combo deck for a while, and I thought that deck was pretty sweet. It was really hard to play, but it helped me get the feel for the basic, like, Mishra's Bauble, Street Wraith sequencing, and, like, tie-roping the life total dance with Death Shadow and stuff. And then they banned Gitaxian Probe, and nobody really heard from it for a while. And then in February, a Magic Online list came out that was like 5-0'd a bunch of leagues with Death Shadow Jund, and then like Jerry Thompson and Josh Layton top 8 of that Grand Prix, and I picked up this deck and have not set it down.
Right.
So, yeah.
So what draws you to bringing all the pieces together as opposed to the consensus is, Grixis is the build to go to right now, but you've found a way to get it all to work together, Grixis and Jund, and then you even have the white in the sideboard.
Right, so I played the 4-color version for the Team Open in May after a friend shipped me a list with Stubborn Denial, and we were kind of like, oh, Stubborn Denial is kind of cute, it might get some people off guard. We played a couple leagues, it was great. And so we played it for the Open, we won the Open, and I thought the deck was very well positioned, I thought it was very good, and then Grixis Shadow won the very next Open, and this deck just disappeared.
Yeah.
So my reasoning for that is, like, when that's what Modern was, it was like Fatal Push's format, and Fatal Push was kind of king. Like, that was the card to play. And this deck is not great against Fatal Push decks. So Grixis Shadow gets to play Snapcaster Mage, which is very good in the Fatal Push mirror, and it gets to play Delve Threats, which just get out of Fatal Push range.
Sure.
So this deck is not great against Grixis Shadow, and it kind of evolved from there. But now, Fatal Push isn't everywhere anymore. So the only real Fatal Push decks to see a lot of play are Grixis Shadow and like maybe Abzan or Jund here and there.
Sure.
But this deck is very good against the rest of that. So Grixis Shadow plays a lot of air. They play cantrips like Serum Vision, Sleight of Hand, Thought Scour, and you just spend a lot of your early turns not really impacting the board that well, and this deck can really get on the board well in the early turns.
Yeah, you cut out most of that. You have a bunch of ways to cycle through your deck between, Mishra's Bauble, but outside of that, and Traverse and Street Wraith, all your stuff is interaction, and then you're just finding ways to put Death Shadow and Tarmogoyf into play.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Delver style deck where all your cards are cheaper than your opponents and you want to kind of get under them, but then it plays the best cards in the format. So it's kind of, I like to call it a Jund deck that plays Delver cards, or a Delver deck that plays Jund cards. It doesn't really matter. It can feel like playing either depending on the matchup and the game. There's a lot of flexibility there, so.
Okay, so what is appealing to you about this build? Because, the way Modern shifts, you're in a situation here where you're not great against the Fatal Push decks, but those have kind of moved away. I have to imagine you like your matchups against stuff like Storm, maybe Eldrazi-Tron, the top decks in the format?
Yeah, so I think the Eldrazi-Tron matchup is very good. Post-board, we have Disdainful Strokes for the big stuff and Ancient Grudge, and Tarmogoyf is just the main, like, Tarmogoyf being good is what makes this deck good. So Tarmogoyf is bigger than all of the other relevant cards in the format, right? It can get out of Reality Smasher range pretty easily. It's bigger than Grimag Angler, it's bigger than Tasigur, and it just beats down really hard. So game 1 against Eldrazi-Tron, you really have to fade the Chalice for one, and then just try to go bigger than them with Tarmogoyf and Liliana of the Veil is really the main plan of attack.
So we'll take a look at the deck now. We have all the discard spells, Inquisition, Thoughtseize, to go along with Stubborn Denial, which is, the hallmarked Grixis cards. Then you have your Jund cards with the Traverse package, Terminate, Abrupt Decay, filling out the rest.
Yeah.
Is there anything you're missing here that you don't have access to something like Temur Battle Rage or anything like that?
So,
or do you just not need those cards anymore?
Stubborn Denial and Temur Battle Rage can fill a lot of the same basic plan. They're designed to like cut off your opponent's draw steps, right? So Battle Rage you can play when you're losing and just like close out the game a turn faster. It can cut off a top deck. But Stubborn Denial can do many of the same things. Since you don't care as much about the creatures of the format, since your creatures are so much bigger, a lot of the cards that beat you are all the non-creature spells. So Stubborn Denial can also cut off that draw step while not being dead like Battle Rages in like more game ones.
Sure. Then we've got Liliana as your main planeswalker here. Just the attrition card that you need.
It's real good. Like the all the modes are very relevant. It's just a 2-for-1 on a stick, and it lets you go late against decks like Blue Light Control or Grixis Shadow, where having 3 of this card really helps you grind out the games where otherwise the Snapcaster Mages would take over.
All right, so leading into this event, Chris Anderson said on Facebook, we're bringing out the deck that everyone's still sleeping on. You know, this is the top tier deck that people aren't playing. Let's be honest, because this deck, you know, you have all the colors of the rainbow in this deck. How hard is this deck to play? Because, you know, this isn't 3-color. You have everything post-sideboard. You're fetching your, one-of shock lands and stuff like that. How are you sequencing, and how hard is the deck really to play?
So you definitely need to get in a lot of reps before you can like show up to an event with this and expect to do well. But once you learn the basic like bauble sequencing or like the sequencing of all the cards, it's not, they're like play patterns that emerge that you can pick up on, and after that, there are only a few real decisions you have per game. Okay. So it's very difficult to pick up and win with, but if you put in the time, I think it's one of the best decks in Modern.
Okay. And let's move on to the sideboard here. This is where we're going to see our white cards. We have Lingering Souls, and then we have the Ranger of Eos. We saw this very early on as the Splash and the Jund builds as a way to just get extra Death Shadows.
Yeah, we call this the way to beat Snapcaster Mage, because Snapcaster Mage is a really tough card to try to beat. Your game plan to go long is Liliana the Veil a lot of the time, and Snapcaster Mage is very good when you're relying on Liliana the Veil. So we bring in the Ranger of Eos, the Godless Shrine, and 3 Lingering Souls, and it just really helps us against those Fatal Push decks that I mentioned earlier we weren't great set up against.
Right.
So the way the sideboarding with this deck works is you almost never have to play more than 4 colors. Okay. So when you bring in the white, a lot of the times you can cut either the blue or the red.
Oh, so then you're just mainly a 4-color deck that has the option to switch whenever you'd like.
Right, you get to pick which 4 colors you want for any given matchup.
Okay.
There are some matchups where, like against the small creature decks, where you want things like Is It Staticaster and also Lingering Souls. So that's when those are really the only matchups where you play all 5.
Okay. Then we have your extra blue cards here, your Disdainful Strokes. These are for the Tron matchups,
the big mana
like
decks,
that.
yep.
Ancient Grudge here, Affinity, all the
Lantern,
prison artifact
Ad
decks.
Nauseam, Chalice of the Void. It's very good against Tron, Eldrazi and regular. You can hit like Chalice against Eldrazi or O-Stone against regular. It can take care of a Wormcoil Engine or Walking Ballista or whatever you want.
Okay, and then lastly we have a Liliana Last Hope, and then 2 other targets here. We have Gore Clan Rampager. One of my favorite parts of the original deck is that you can tutor up this pump spell and then Kozilek's Return. Take us through where these cards are coming in.
So we only had 1 real slot for one of the trample cards, and I played a Temur Battle Rage in Louisville where I top-aided like a month ago, but after playing this deck, we think if we have like 2 slots, 2 Battle Rages is better than like 1 Rampager or 1 Battle Rage, but being able to traverse for your 1 trample card and have a virtual 5 copies for the price of 1 is very powerful.
Okay. And
then the Is It Staticaster is mostly for Storm and also the other small creature decks. Empty the Warrens is the main plan of attack for them post-board, so having a couple turns to traverse for a Staticaster can really cut off a lot of their plans. Okay. And then Kozilek's Return and Liliana the Last Hope are for the small creature decks. Last Hope's also passable against the other Snapcaster decks.
Is there anything in the format that this deck doesn't really cover? Because having access to all this stuff, a quick clock, disruption, seems to just put you in a great spot in the format.
Yeah, I think you can tweak the 75 to be basically anything in Modern. This weekend I decided I wanted to lose to Dredge. I'm playing no Graveyard Hate in the entire 75. You could cut a bunch of cards and play a bunch of Nile Spellbombs, but 1 or 2 Graveyard Hate cards isn't going to cut it against Dredge, and I didn't feel like devoting all the sideboard slots to that. Right. So.
Makes sense. I think Dredge is actually on the decline right now, so you might be in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, we're also pretty rough against the Leanin Arbiter decks, because our mana's pretty greedy. We only have the 1 basic, but that deck's not super widely played either. I feel very good against the top other 5 decks in the format.
All right, where do you see, to wrap up, Modern as a format right now? Storm has been taking over. Do you think that deck could take a hit? It survived this banning, and anything in this deck, do you fear moving forward?
I think Storm is very, very good. This deck has a very good Storm matchup, but Storm may be too good eventually. Wizards has shown they're not afraid to ban Storm cards, and it's been a lot worse than this.
Sure.
This deck, I don't know, it's very hard to play, so it's not a kind of deck that's going to see a ton of play, but it really overperforms in the hands of the players that have put in the reps with it. So I think this deck might eventually be too good. Right now, it's probably fine.
All right. Well, Clay, you're off to a great start. You've already top-aided 1 Open with this deck. You won another Open.
Oh, yeah.
We're getting there.
Okay.
So appreciate you joining me here in the sideboard and filling us in. Clay Spicklemire, I'm Nick Miller. Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com all weekend long for the action here in Cincinnati.